Hello and welcome to The Right Perspective. And today we're going to talk about a leader who, personally, I believe is one of the most unsung as far as our freedom struggle is concerned. A person who went to great lengths to try and ensure that there is an army that stands. And he always believed that you've got to fight for what is yours. Nobody's going to give it to you on a platter. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. But there are a few gentlemen who have taken this thought and have been obsessed with it for nearly 2 decades now. And they are on a mission for Netaji. One of them today is joining us, Chandrachud Ghosh, whose book is up for pre-order, Bose, the Untold Story. So this is a series of many books that you've written or that you guys at Mission Netaji have written, Chandrachud Ghosh. First up, congratulations on the new book and thank you for joining me here on this conversation. But what is the untold story about Bose? Let me ask you that.
Well, first of all, Anand, thank you very much for having me on the show. And it's a pleasure, always a pleasure to talk to you. And the untold story is, let me start by giving you a small piece of statistics. If we consider the active period of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's political life, and there we look at their political output, the written output of three top leaders, Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, and Subhash Bose. So for that period of 1921 to 1945, if we look at the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, we have nearly 30,000 printed pages.
Yes.
For Pandit Nehru, we have nearly 9,000 pages. And compared to them, for Netaji, we have just about 3,000 printed pages. That is 1/3 of Pandit Nehru and 1/10 of Mahatma Gandhi. Certainly he did not write or speak any less than the other two. But then that's all that has been put out in public domain. So that gives you a snapshot of how much we know of the man. Well, the broad contours have always been known. The broad key headline events of his life are already very well known to most of our countrymen. I mean, that he was rusticated from the Presidency College for assaulting a professor. And then he went and stood fourth in the ICS. He went to England and stood fourth in the ICS. He quit the ICS, came back, joined the Congress under Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das, and then became the CEO of the Calcutta Corporation. Then he was sent to the Mandalay jail, the jail prisons in Burma, for nearly 3.5 to 4 years. And then he came back and joined Congress, stood up as a young voice, a rebellious voice against Mahatma Gandhi's policy. And then in 1932, he was arrested, and then after that, packed off to 4 years exile in Europe. He came back, became the president, again rebelled against Mahatma Gandhi, won the presidential election against Gandhiji's wishes. And then he left the country, went to Germany, set up a Free India Center, almost a government, and was raising an army. From Germany, he came to East Asia, where he set up a proper provisional government of Azad Hind, set up a proper Indian National Army. And so these are the broad contours, which are all pretty much well known. But then, I mean, in a formula, his biography, his story has always been told in a set pattern, set formula, where the broad headlines take up so much space that we lose sight of the man. We lose sight of the man in the sense, I mean, was he just rushing from one spot to another without pausing and thinking what free India would be? Do we really know what his stand on secularism was? What his thoughts on religious freedom was? Or do we know the full picture? Do we know the full story? And what was his interaction with the revolutionary societies? What was the extent of his interaction with the revolutionary societies across the country? He was not only a leader of Bengal. Surprisingly, although, I mean, he had a very, very strong base in Bengal, and yet he had reached out to the societies in Maharashtra, in Punjab, in the Northwest Frontier province, and he had massive support in those areas. He toured extensively in South India, in Andhra, in Tamil Nadu. So all these networks that he established, what were their role? I mean, what kind of interaction was he having? What was his vision? And when he rebelled against Gandhiji, why would he? It was not just a power struggle. I mean, he had a very uh, articulated, well articulated view. He had differed with Gandhiji a number of times and over very specific policy issues. What were those policy issues? I mean, was it just no, no, I want freedom, and right now was that the only issue? No, I mean, certainly not. He had a very clear vision. So when he goes to Germany, what plan does he take there? I mean, was he a fascist collaborator? Was he a Nazi collaborator? The way the world, particularly the Western world, tries to put him in that imagery, in that symbol. I mean, they have reduced Subhash Chandra Bose, the Western media and the Western press have reduced Subhash Chandra Bose to that single definition of a Nazi collaborator. But is that all there is to him? Certainly not. And he comes back to Japan, and then from Japan, the INA comes back defeated into the country. And then, as soon as they step into the country, there's a massive mass upsurge. What was the nature of that upsurge? How were the British administrators grappling with them? And what impact did it have? Did it have any impact at all? So all these things, I won't say these, all of these are unknown. Much of them are known.
Yes.
There is certainly many areas which have never been emphasized, which are less told, less known, and certainly there are areas which have been covered, which have been suppressed. I mean, by our
Right.
academic historians and historians who have put Subhash Bose's story into a very set pattern and formula. So the effort of this book is to break out of that formula and look into the multiple dimensions of the man.
So, who was, let me ask you this, out of the 3,000 pages, you might have at least about half of those 3,000 pages must have come from Mission Netaji itself or members. That includes you, Anuj Dhar, and Srijit, and so many others. But let me ask you this. Did Bose die on the 18th of August 1945?
Well, all the evidence that we have been able to gather till now, certainly not. Certainly
So
not.
he did. So he lived beyond 18th August 1945. There are arguments that you've made in your previous books where you have argued that he found his way back into India. So is that part of the untold story to further embellish that argument?
Well, Anand, in this book, deliberately, I have not touched upon the mystery at all, because the mystery being by itself such a big issue, I didn't want to put it as an end chapter, which most biographies do. It deserves to be told completely separately and in full detail, which we have tried to do over the years through Anuj's India's Biggest Cover-Up and then our joint authorship, Conundrum. So
Conundrum.
that is a completely separate phase which deserves full attention rather than being appended to the end of a biography.
So in this bolster the untold story, have you stuck to till pre 1945?
Till
Till pre
1945, till
till
1945,
19.
when he is leaving Singapore towards an unknown destination, towards Russia, actually. But that is where I have stopped.
That's where you've stopped. And now, what were you able to produce? Where was Bose divergent in his opinion with Mahatma Gandhi? Did Bose also, was he in touch with the likes of Savarkar? Did he identify with what their ideals were? The Anushilan Samiti, was this a way of trying to connect? If he has to become the All India Congress president in 1938-39, if I remember correctly, then he obviously had to have national support. So whereabouts did he get his support, and why did? So clearly there was a group which perhaps was it an extension of the Garam Dal that lent towards Subhash Bose?
Well, yeah. Frankly, it was not a monolithic support coming towards him. Uh, by the time that he became the president of the Indian National Congress, he had a wide base of support, and his radical programs. I mean, the speech which he gave as the president of the Indian National Congress at Haripura in 1938, if one reads it carefully, it would read like uh, a policy speech given sometime in, say, 2015. So he was so far ahead of his time. And there he was talking about removing the agricultural debt, the burden of debt of the farmers. He was emphasizing on the need for population control, talking about monetary policy, talking about uh, religious freedom, the common language. That was a very contentious issue that he touched upon. What should be India's common language? So all these issues, I mean, the issues that we are still grappling with in modern India. He was discussing those in minute detail. India's foreign policy. What should India's foreign policy? I mean, we heard Narendra Modi come to power with the motto "India first," but then we see Subhash Chandra Bose talking non-stop in 1939 when the World War has just started, that India must think of herself first. India comes first. So rather than having universal humanitarian points of view, which are important, no doubt, but keeping them ahead of your national interest is not going to serve India. So coming back to a question of his network of support, these were mainly the youth organizations across the country. We had the Naujawan Bharat Sabha, we had the Anushilan and the Jugantar were the two main revolutionary societies in Bengal. But unfortunately for Bengal, most of the times there was a very deep internecine conflict between these revolutionary groups, and that had caused a split within the Bengal Congress also. But there were other radical youth organizations, radical revolutionary societies. For example, the one led by Master Surya Sen of the Chittagong Armory raid case. Then there were groups in Dhaka. There were groups in Barisal. Most of these places are now in Bangladesh. And
Right.
these groups strongly stood behind him. They were radical in their policy, radical in their outlook. They wanted freedom, and they had taken to very strong, violent policies. And Subhash was constantly having a dialogue with them, trying to impress upon them that uh, individual political assassinations are, I mean, they might have worked at that at one time, but they are not going to take us very far. So what we need to do
Right.
is to organize. So he put a lot of stress on organizing these small organizations, uh, bring them together, build up a volunteer core. And he was successful to the extent where I have shown in the biography that up to the level of viceroy, they were really worried. And the volunteer corps that he started building up from 1928, as when the National Congress session happened in Calcutta, Pandit Motilal Nehru was the president of it, and Subhash organized the volunteer corps in completely military model, unarmed, armed with only lathis. No firearms were allowed, but so disciplined and so well trained they were. It was to complete distaste of Mahatma Gandhi. He didn't like it at all,
Yeah, right.
but it was appreciated all over. And the British administrators, the governor, the viceroy, the viceroy's council members, they were worried. I mean, we see the viceroy communicating with the Secretary of State in London, what can be done and what should be done, because this is becoming a huge threat. And so he is organizing these radical forces. He is building networks with the radical forces in United Provinces. People like Sachindranath Sanal, Jogesh Chandra Chatterjee. These were the original revolutionaries of the First World War era. And with Bhagat Singh's HSRA, Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, with the Naujawan Bharat Sabha, with the Kirti Kisan Party in Punjab, and in Maharashtra, he is getting support from the radicals like K.F. Nariman, uh, who was solidly standing behind him. So he is getting a massive support from the youth and the radical section of the awakened society, and that is
Right.
causing headache, unfortunately. I mean, of course, to the British administrators, but also to the Gandhian High Command in the Congress. So nobody wants in the high command. Nobody wants him to become a Congress president for the second time. So these were factors at play, and with in 1929, the major policy difference, the major difference that he had with Gandhiji was, of course, I mean, 1929, when complete independence was declared as the goal of
Yeah.
the Indian National Congress. In 1928, Subhash and Jawaharlal, both Pandit Nehru, both tried to have complete independence as the goal, but they, because of the insistence of Mahatma Gandhi and Pandit Motilal Nehru, they uh, gave in for that 1 year when Gandhiji said that, okay, let's wait for 1 year. We have the Nehru Constitution in front of us. Let us offer it to the British government. Give them 1 year, and if they don't accept it, in 1929 we will declare complete independence as a goal. But when the 1929 Congress happened in Lahore, Subhas said, I mean, why are we even declaring complete independence as our goal? Why can't we, as the biggest organization, political organization in this country, set up a parallel government? Let's set up a parallel government. And
Yeah.
uh, and the idea was so radical that, I mean, Gandhiji dedicated hours to cut his arguments and have it rejected, his amendment. And then again in 1939, 10 years later, he comes up, he says that, well, enough is enough. The war has started. The British government is exploiting our country without the permission of the people of this country. They are just using our materials, our resources, our people,
Yeah.
sending all over the world. Let's give them just 6 hours, 6 months ultimatum, and then let's get into a movement, a satyagraha movement, a civil disobedience movement. And if we can do that well, we will surely be able to
Break
gain.
away.
So
Yeah.
that too is not liked by the Gandhian High Command, and the conflict increases, and then he is thrown out of the Congress. The
Well,
Bose brothers.
did Subhash Bose envisage partition? Did Subhash Bose, what was Subhash Bose's position as far as the Muslim League was concerned? This two nation theory was concerned.
He opposed partition tooth and nail. See, I mean, when we talk about partition, the way finally the shape in which Pakistan came in, that shape developed pretty later, much later. And
Yeah.
the earlier ideas of having the country divided into two units, which was according to the Muslim League's theory and Jinnah's proposition, that Hindus and Muslims are two nations, two different nations, and so the provinces should be split in a way where under a federal government we have two different units. So Subhash was completely against it, and obviously he was very much for religious freedom. So he kept saying that, I mean, this is a creation of the British government. The Muslim League is a party of yes men and traitors. So they are just playing to the signal of the British government. And once Congress gains independence, once Congress comes to power, once we get in India gets independence, this is an issue which we are confident of taking off the table. I mean, there is, frankly speaking, uh, most he showed that, I mean, out of the 11 provinces, the Congress was in power in 8, and even in the non-Congress provinces, Muslim League was in power in only one province. And
Yeah.
funnily, the Muslim League prime minister in that province was not following the Muslim League policy. So he said, where is the Muslim League? I mean, how can you even claim that you are the sole representative of the Muslims of this country? And Subhash had a background, such a background of standing for communal unity and building an India where communities came together, where minorities had their say, had their voice, that even people who subscribe to Muslim League ideology or policy, or they were members of the Muslim League, they were supporting him. So he played along with the Hindu. He tried to build a broad collaboration, an alliance, trying to bring Hindu Mahasabha from one side, the Muslim League from the other side. While the Congress High Command was opposing him, he was working to bring the revolutionaries, the Hindu Mahasabha, the Muslim League, all on a broad platform with some sort of common program. So that
Right.
was.
See, in 1928, you mentioned that both him and Jawaharlal Nehru were on the same page when they said, let's declare complete independence. When did their paths separate? And when Netaji Bose walked out of the Congress party, why did he decide to leave the country and settle in Germany? What was his idea behind allying or getting closer to Hitler?
Uh, Nehru and both Pandit Nehru and Subhash, uh, ideologically they had similar ideas. They were similarly placed ideologically speaking. Pandit Nehru probably was a bit more attached to abstract political principles, abstract political theories, whereas Subhas was more of a realist and pragmatist. He said, I mean, obviously he had his likes and dislikes, but his position was that what is happening in other countries is their internal affairs. It's not our headache, not our problem. Our real problem is to gain freedom and then to look at the reconstruction of our country. So, uh, program wise, policy wise, political ideology wise, they were pretty close to each other. If there was anything that Subhash found very annoying and very disappointing, was that the constant submission of Pandit Nehru to Gandhiji's program. Although Pandit Nehru differed from Gandhiji's program, individually, personally, he would submit himself to Gandhiji's program and the breaking off from Subhash. So that he found annoying, and he criticized Nehru on this in his book Indian Struggle, which he wrote in 1934 when he was in exile in Europe. And at that time, he found very big support from Vallabhbhai Patel's elder brother, Vittalbhai Patel. Vittalbhai Patel was a member of the Swaraj Party and a colleague of Deshbandhu Chittaranjan, who was his
Yeah.
mentor. So they criticized, they issued a very, very strong criticism from Europe, both of them from Vienna, and they were in Geneva, they were moving around in those circles. And Vittalbhai Patel was towards the fag end of his life. He would die very soon, within a few months.
Yeah.
So there was a moving eye. But then when Pandit Nehru came to Europe for Kamala Nehru's treatment, Subhas took up a lot of responsibility. He took care of the family. He took care of Kamala Nehru. And at that time, we find a certain amount of closeness developing between Nehru and Bose. So they were getting the space to talk about their ideas, their programs. And the next year, next 2 years, then Pandit Nehru is the president of the Congress. So Subhas giving him complete, full support for all his programs. He's taking his guidance. He's writing to him very affectionate letters, and this continued till around mid 1938. But then after that, the ideas started diverging, their methodology started diverging, their global outlook, the foreign policy outlooks started clashing. And there was even then Nehru tried to patch up between the Gandhian high command and Subhash, but Nehru was himself drifting away towards the Gandhian high command. So
Right.
the full break happened after 1939, and this was as much over personality as over ideology. So
Over
there, that divergence happened.
Great. Chandrachud Ghosh, always pleasure, and always there is so much more to talk about because there is so much of information that's not being spoken about. But I have to thank you for contributing a few more pages towards Netaji's legacy and chronicling it. We look forward to reading the book very soon. It's not on the shelves yet, is it?
It's not on the shelves yet, but it is available for pre-order on Amazon and Flipkart. So I hope uh, friends and the audience would go for it. I can promise this much, that there would be a huge amount of information which you have not come across, because I mean, as I said, that the amount of information that was in the public domain was so very little that, and we took care to go into the contemporary sources and bring out the hidden aspects of his personality. So hopefully I will be able to meet that demand, and hopefully we'll get a lot of support from the readers. And
Well, you picked my intrigue because after Conundrum, I thought there is not much to be sold. But now that you're telling me that this is all before the 18th of August 1945, and there is a
absolutely,
lot that is untold, so I'm also looking forward to getting a copy
there's an
and reading
entirely
it very
new
very
man to
soon.
be discovered. An
Oh,
entire
absolutely.
So I hope that will happen. And it's always a
Okay.
pleasure, Anand. Thank you so very much for having me on your show.
No, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for doing this. Thanks,
Thank
Chandraju. Bye.
Bye bye.